that cornfield calm, Midwest tone, but he's spitting facts like a dog with a bone. Lanky frame, fire-haired, eyes on the case, breaking down the game in the darkest place. Sports scores to murder boards, Hoosier logic cuts like swords. From Friday lights to chalked out lines, this redhead's brain rewrites the lines inside the Hoosier mind, where the stories twist and stats unwind. He's a legend in flannel, mic in hand, digging deep where few can stand. From touchdowns to crime scenes raw, he's got the truth in every draw. Yeah, step in if you dare to find what's brewing inside the Hoosier mind. He'll talk Pacers, Colts, or Colts on trial. Hoosier humor with a devilish smile. He's that redhead sleuth with a box of clues. Takes your headline, breaks the news. With every stat and every scream, he's painting portraits in your stream. Don't blink, he'll tie it tight. From game night wins to murder flight. Inside the Hoosier mind, where the facts hit hard and the lines are blind. He's a ginger ninja, smooth and slick, cracking cases play by play quick. From courtrooms to the hardwood floor, he digs for more than just the score. Tune in and don't rewind, you're deep now inside the Hoosier mind.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice here on the last day of September. We are getting ready to enter spooky season technically tomorrow on October 1st, and it was a nightmare for college football, and it was especially a nightmare for picks, and it was a nightmare for my LSU Tigers this past weekend, and all of the college football upsets. It's one of the things I love, and it's one of the things I hate about college football is you never know what's going to happen. Like me this year, I've been trying to make picks all throughout the season. I've been trying to do Power 4 versus Power 4 because honestly, Power 4 versus like a group of 6 or like an FCS school doesn't really matter as much. And very, 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 very rarely is there ever an upset. Now, there has been so far this season, and that's been great, but nobody really wants to cover that. I like to cover the big games so far. I'm 52-30 in my picks overall, so not great, not bad. Better than some of the professionals have been doing so far. But have an absolute packed show today. Everything as far as college football and NFL goes, because there's so much to talk about what happened. I'm going to dive into a little bit of each one of them. Primarily going to go after the big games, though. Nothing too crazy. But let's go into the first game that happened that already started my Friday off last weekend, off to a bad start as far as my picks go. There were 3 games that took place Friday night. You had Florida State at Virginia, TCU at Arizona State, Houston and Oregon State. By the time I had gone to bed, Florida State and Virginia was already over. Virginia got the big upset over the Seminoles. And then TCU was down to Arizona State really, really badly. And I had Arizona State winning. And then Houston was down to Oregon State. It was like 14-0. And Oregon State had even just got a pick 6 for a touchdown. I was like, oh man, that's like, I'm going to potentially wake up Saturday morning. I'm going to be 0-3 in my picks. This is not off to a good weekend. I ended up being 2-1 that Friday night because Arizona State and Houston both ended up coming back for the wins. But a little bit of cardiac palpitations. I was like, I might not be able to make this pick, but we'll see. But let's get into the big game of that Friday night, though. Florida State versus Virginia. Virginia gets massive upset wins. First time they've been able to do that in years. And against a Florida State team that, all honesty, I don't know if this Florida State team is truly built to be able to have the adversity of being able to come back from being down, especially this particular Florida State team. You know, they were ahead against Bama pretty much the entire game, with the exception of they were down against the initial touchdown to start, and then they roared back. Being down by a touchdown isn't that bad. If you're down by 2 scores, makes it a little bit more difficult because then that gives Virginia the chance to really do kind of whatever they want to do. And if you're Virginia, run the ball, do a lot of short screens, get enough yardage to get yourself to first down, but don't take any big chunk plays. Milk the clock, keep them off the field for as long as you can to, give yourself a better chance of being able to win. So really surprised that Florida State didn't seem to be able to rally as a result of it. I still think they'll do pretty well. I don't necessarily know if they're going to be able to win the ACC as a result of that, though. I think right now with the ACC, it's honestly between Miami and Georgia Tech. I know Georgia Tech even struggled a little bit this weekend with Wake Forest because they were even down at one point. Ended up taking it all the way to overtime. Haynes King, the quarterback for Georgia Tech, for whatever reason, he's able to pull it out. He was the leader of the passing for both teams, is 243 yards. He's also a great runner of the football. I swear the dude just lowers his head and just takes the hits on top of being able to throw it. So to me, I think Florida State has a chance. I think their benefit is Georgia Tech does keep it really close. Georgia Tech can compete with anybody, but if Wake Forest is any indication, they could also lose to anybody as well. Now, albeit Georgia Tech did win, but there's a little bit of an uneasiness if you're kind of struggling against Wake Forest, even in Salem, North Carolina. You're still coming close. That makes me a little bit worried. Not super worried about Florida State, though. I still think this kind of gives them a chance to rally. Now, they do have a tough task this week because they go up against Miami, but they do have the advantage of it is at Florida State, if I remember correctly. So they do at least have that. They don't have to worry about having to go on the road to face anybody. Let me actually triple check that just to make sure. Yeah, so they're actually going to be at home in Tallahassee. So they'll have that benefit of at least the Ruckus Stadium and whatnot. But it does leave a lot of questions for me for the Seminoles of if they potentially do get down against the Canes, can they mount a comeback to where it's okay, we can keep it close. They were able to do it with Virginia. There's a couple of moments where it's like, man, they were this close to winning the game, and it just ended up falling straight out of their hands. But nonetheless, great game for Friday night though. Saturday, we had so many good matchups Saturday. And again, we'll talk about the big games. I'm not going to go too crazy into a whole bunch of these. The ones that I do want to talk about, though, that are probably the most surprising, USC travel to Illinois. USC was ranked 21st. Illinois is ranked 23. Dropped all the way from 9 because of a 53-point loss to IU the week before Illinois did. And they just looked like the more physical team against the Trojans. In all honesty, had Illinois kind of not beat themselves off of a couple turnovers and USC was able to get 10 points, Illinois would have potentially won by almost double digits as far as how they ended up playing. Now, USC, statistically still put up a bunch. Jaden Mayava, 364 yards. Mekhi Lemon had a big day with 151 receiving yards. Yeah, it does lead a lot of questions about USC, though. And this was something that I was even listening to as I was on my way to work today. Brady Quinn brought this up. It does leave a lot of questions for what is USC necessarily doing, because it doesn't seem as though they're invested everything that they can into making their football program great. They had that big run pretty much all the way up until the early 2000s, really. And even in the early 2000s, when you had Pete Carroll, you had Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, you had all those guys coming out of USC, back-to-back national champions. They haven't been back to that level since. Now, there was a little inkling of that when Caleb Williams was there. Obviously, he ended up winning the Heisman. They had a great year that year. They lost to Utah like 3 times that year. They didn't have any type of a defense, and that's still an issue. It's not as big of an issue as it was, but it is still a significant issue. And then USC and UCLA and all those teams come from the Pac-12 into the Big Ten. You got to have guys that are be able to control the line of scrimmage. You got to have big offensive linemen, and they've gotten better. They've gotten bigger, but they haven't done much. And I feel like when you look at USC, you look at where they're standing in the Big Ten, they're right about middle of the pack. And that's kind of what I expected them to be. I didn't expect them to be able to come in and do anything tremendous. And I know it's going to sound crazy when I probably say this, and I might get a little bit of some hate comments for this. It makes me question Lincoln Riley as a head coach. Like, you were great at Oklahoma. You had 3 Heisman winning quarterbacks at Oklahoma. You did absolutely fantastic. You did great with Baker. You did great with Jalen. You did great with Kyler. You at Tech, you even had Caleb, and you brought Caleb over. So you've had multiple great quarterbacks. You are a great offensive guy. You don't do anything on the other side of the ball, and it leaves a lot to be desired. And it does leave a lot to be desired when you come into the Big Ten, because that's a different style of football. You're going to have big guys to be able to not only dominate the trenches as far as your offense, to be able to get those electric offenses going. You're going to have a defense that at least stands up and measures. I'm not saying you have to have like a top 10 defense, The Big Ten, you got to have like top 50. You can't you got to have even a middle of the pack defense. You can't have bottom tier defensive play if you're in the Big Ten, because the other Big Ten teams just aren't going to let you get away with it. They're gonna make that defense look bad if you do. So a little bit surprised. Great for Illinois to be able to get the bounce back, though. Again, does make me kind of worry a little bit about Illinois as far as being able to trust them to make a run, because they do have a little bit of a brutal schedule. But USC, though, it's a disappointment. Now, they did have at least one big win before. They got a quality win against Michigan State, but much that was brought up earlier with Brady Quinn, yes, it's a quality win because you beat a Power 4 team, but Michigan State's also not at the point where they would like to be, even at this point in the season, even into Jonathan Smith's second year. They're not anywhere where they would like to be at, and there's still a lot of work that Michigan State has to do. So good win for them. However, it wasn't exactly the sexiest or the prettiest win by no means. So that was that was Illinois versus USC. Like I said, Georgia Tech versus Wake Forest, that one worried me a little bit. Indiana ends up actually getting a pretty big win over Iowa to be able to seal their win. Indiana has a really tough schedule, though, ahead of this. I know they have to face Oregon, they have to face Penn State, and if I remember correctly, both of those games are on the road, as well as so is the game against Maryland. And if IU can walk out of that like 2-1, I think they're going to make out pretty good. 10-2, though, I kind of see that being a little bit more of a factor. I don't know if they'll be able to win even. I think they have a chance to win at least one of those games, and I think that game against Maryland is the one that they win. I don't think they're going to be able to do that against Oregon. I think Oregon just simply has too much for them to try to be able to overcome. And then same for Penn State. So the Hoosiers' next few games that they have to go to Oregon on the 11th of October. So they're actually going into a bye week. So they've got a couple weeks to prepare, which is good. Then they host Michigan State, very winnable. They host UCLA, should be a win. Then they travel to Maryland. That's going to be rough. And then they travel to Penn State immediately after, host Wisconsin, and then they go to Purdue. So, I mean, even if they lose to Oregon, there's a chance they could bounce back. But again, they get kind of 2 easy games, and then they get 2 really hard games, and then they get 2 easy games after that. That could potentially be enough for them to repeat and go back into the playoffs. I'm not going to say that's a definitive, but it does make me kind of question a little bit. But again, they made the Illini look like a bunch of bums. But I would say they might be able to do that against Maryland. Maryland does have the benefit of they have a true freshman quarterback, Malik Washington, that's doing absolutely fantastic. Hopefully he's able to stay healthy up to that point. Hopefully Maryland's able to stay rolling to that point as well. And they typically play to that level of, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. Typically IU plays to teams that are about at the same level of talent as they are. To me, Oregon, Penn State, and Ohio State are all up here. Indiana is kind of a little bit above middle of the pack right now with kind of how they play and who they play against, and they're able to get those wins. I don't know if they're necessarily able to get those wins that are in more of that top tier echelon, though. Ohio State, I won't go super deep into this. They did beat Washington. They struggled a little bit at the beginning of the at the first half of the game. They ended up kind of coming alive the second half. There's some struggles, but Washington's a tough place to play. It's a fairly good team. Jed Fish definitely has the team kind of heading in the right direction up there. So I don't really have a whole lot to say on that, because I'll be honest, I didn't really watch that game as much because it was the 3:30 game. In all honesty, I was more interested in LSU versus Ole Miss, which I guess I can go ahead and talk about since the last 2 games kind of happened later on in the night. So LSU travels to Oxford, Mississippi, loses to Ole Miss. Trinidad Chambliss, he looks great. I mean, he's filled in for Stevens there at Ole Miss. Stevens has 3 touchdowns, 3 picks, if I remember correctly. And Chambliss has, I believe, 7 touchdowns and 1 pick. That pick finally coming against LSU. But he's got multiple wins, and Ole Miss is sitting at 5-0. They jumped up to 4, and LSU dropped down to 13. They essentially just switched positions and rankings, which is kind of surprising, because you look at this Ole Miss team, they lost so much to the draft as far as that defensive line goes, and then of course they lost a lot as far as the offense. You lose a great quarterback in Jackson Dart, who made the offense look electric. So it does kind of make you wonder, what does Ole Miss look like after that? So I mean, they were able to get a quality win against LSU. I think the biggest thing, honestly, though, and again, I might be a little bit biased because for anybody who does watch the show, I am a huge LSU fan. Um, is it Ole Miss won or LSU just beat themselves? And I know a couple of people were kind of criticizing the defense of, oh, the defense isn't that good. They couldn't stop Ole Miss. They couldn't stop Ole Miss because they're on the field so much. They're on the field so much. They're trying to have to, contain a scrambling quarterback, which they struggled with last year. They struggled extremely bad with running quarterbacks last year. And you look at the team now, the offense was quick 3-and-outs. They were getting off the field super fast. So an already tired defense has to go back out to try to get the stops against an Ole Miss team that is very much in the, hurry up tempo. As soon as they get a first down, they're all but calling to go back to line of scrimmage to, basically snap the ball again. So they didn't really get a whole lot of time to even rest in between plays before Ole Miss is like, all right, we're ready to go. Let's go. So I don't think it's as much on the defense as it was the offense not being able to click. Caden Durham was out, so they had no run game. They were trying to do a lot of these kind of wide receiver screen passes, these bubble routes and whatnot to try to get an extension of the run game going, which can work. There was some success, but you just can't replace not running the football. And I mean, they do have other backs. They have Barry had a couple solid runs, kind of a couple solid first downs. Caleb Jackson is another one. He's a little bit more experienced. He's kind of a power back. So, I mean, if anything, try to get some of the first, short first yardage and then use him for like 2 downs. See if you can get it to like 2nd and 5 and then use the big running back, try to, ground and pound. The offensive line obviously took a hit. The right guard ended up getting hurt. They were out the right tackle to start the game anyway. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think LSU's still good. I think Nussmeier, they did mention that he ended up taking a hit at some point in one of the first few games. So his rib cage is obviously a little sore. He just doesn't have the accuracy that he had last year. And he makes a lot of kind of boneheaded throws. Like he throws into triple coverage. He throws into where guys he's not supposed to. And it was kind of the hope of, okay, man, you threw 29 touchdowns, but you threw 12 picks last year. Don't do that. You're the son of a coach who's coaching currently right now in the NFL for the Saints, which maybe that explains a little bit of why, because it's the Saints. But you shouldn't be making those decisions. Don't throw it. If you got one white jersey and you got 3 powder blue jerseys, don't throw where the 3 powder blue jerseys are. Don't do that. But he did anyway. He was lucky. He did only get intercepted once, but it does leave LSU a lot to be desired. And a lot of disappointment for LSU fans towards Brian Kelly, because I mean, he talked a lot of smack. Of course, there was a whole lot of drama with with Lane Kiffin's daughter coming out, as far as dropping the photos and whatnot of her and Whit Weeks, the linebacker for LSU, which crazy by the way. And Lane said, "Okay, take the over," which to me, I was like, all right, that might do it. Now the other kind of benefit is with this series, the last few games, whoever was the home team ended up winning. LSU won last year in overtime with a touchdown pass to Kyron Lacey. And then obviously Ole Miss basically dominated this whole entire game. Again, a huge surprise. So the other game that was happening at 7:30 though, that I think took a lot of people by surprise, Alabama versus Georgia. Ty Simpson, 276 yards. Alabama ends up winning 24-21. I'll say this about Alabama. I don't necessarily believe they're back yet. And here's why I say this. And I'm not just saying it because of the week 1 loss to Florida State. I think that was probably more of them just being cocky than anything, because we've seen this a lot of times with teams. They'll kind of overlook teams that they go and face. You look a couple years ago, Ohio State almost did it to Maryland. Maryland took them down to almost overtime. It was a super high scoring game that ended up being close because they were already looking ahead to Penn State. They were already looking ahead to Michigan. So I kind of trip. I think Alabama did that with Florida State. I think for them, they looked at it, okay, it's the start of the season. It's Florida State. They were 2-10. They have a bunch of transfers. It should be a struggle. We shouldn't be that bad. And they end up getting, hit in the mouth, and Florida State just, absolutely runs with it from there. I think for Bama, they got their confidence back once they beat ULM. They got their confidence back once they beat Wisconsin. They really got it back once they beat Georgia. And I think this goes into a couple things, though. Georgia is still having issues with the wide receiver drop. Gunnar Stockton is obviously not the same quarterback level of Carson Beck. And I think for Georgia fans, they might have taken even advantage of him for that. And I'll be the first to say I'm not the biggest Carson Beck supporter. Like I was, everybody's like, oh, he's so good. He's so good. I'm like, if you're so good, why are you, why did you almost lose to a Kentucky? Why did you lose to an Ole Miss? Why is Georgia losing these games that typically Georgia's absolutely dominating in? And people pointed out, hey, they lead the league in drop. They lead the nation in drops, and they still have that issue. And I think now looking back, he was able to cover a lot of that up. I think the other thing for a lot of people, and myself included, is we're used to seeing Georgia with these, top offensive lines. I mean, big guys that are almost always first round picks. They're almost always great. And the running game. And that's something that Georgia hasn't had for a long time. I mean, you think about all the running backs that used to come out of Georgia forever that were just big power running backs that were solid. And we don't see that anymore. And same with the wide receivers and whatnot. The other thing that's a little bit of a question mark is Georgia's defense. I mean, again, I know we saw it and it was before NIL. So, again, paying under the table, whether people want to admit that or not. It's not just Georgia. Everybody else is doing it too. Is just not as out there, not as much money. But, you look at all the great defensive players that have come out of Georgia. And now now again, everybody can pay. So it's like, yeah, the cream isn't all just stuck there. You don't have 5-star among 5-star among 5-star just sitting and waiting at Georgia to get their start and get their chance. Now they can go to another place and they can start basically immediately and they can get paid while they do it. And so for Georgia, it is a little weird that they're not able to beat Bama. They're, I think, 1-6 or now 1-7 against Bama in the last few matchups. And that one win was obviously the national title. But I mean, all the SEC championships, Bama's won. I mean, all the head-to-heads matchups, Bama's won. Look at last year. I mean, Bama absolutely rolled them, and then Bama ended up getting derailed. I do have a lot of questions about Bama still because of the Florida State loss. And because, again, you look at what happened last year, I think they could potentially run into a very similar situation again of they beat a top team like Georgia, like they did last year, and they get a little cocky. And now I believe they face Vanderbilt again about the same time that they did last year. And they went into Vandy's house. Vandy whooped them. And Vandy's been riding that train ever since. And Vandy's a fairly solid team. I mean, I don't expect anything crazy, but I think they'll have a fairly decent year. And I don't expect Vandy to back down against Bama. I think they're going to come into this with some swagger, like, hey, we beat you last year. We beat you once before. A lot of these guys basically came back. We can do it again. And I think if Alabama isn't careful, they might run into that again. And I think if I'm a Bama fan, that's where I have to be worried. And I'm not saying that because, DeBoer isn't a good coach. I'm saying that if I'm an Alabama fan, I look at Kalen DeBoer like, okay, it's great. You can beat the literal big dogs of Georgia. That's awesome. Why can you beat Georgia, but then you lose to Vandy? Why can you beat Georgia, but then you lose to like Oklahoma last year when they were like their 6th and 7th string wide receivers and like a backup quarterback? Like, what are you doing? So that would be my big thing if I'm a Bama fan. Of DeBoer is good, maybe a little bit of too early to try to jump ship on if DeBoer is still the guy to be able to follow up Saban or not, which a lot of more reasonable Alabama fans have admitted is probably too soon to say that he needs to go. But more realistic Alabama fans have also said too, it's an unrealistic expectation to try to follow in Saban's footsteps. All the success that Nick Saban had for 17, almost 20 years. Like, you got to think, he came there in 2007. He finally left in 2023. DeBoer is just in his 2nd season. Now, again, a lot of surprises, a lot of upsets. Again, you could beat good teams, but you lose to bad teams. What are you doing? It's not how this works. But it does make me question the Tide a little bit. Now, they obviously went back into the top 10. Unfortunately, again, not a Bama fan. But again, quality win for them against Georgia, and they snapped Georgia's 33 game win streak there at home in Sanford Stadium. So congrats to them. And last but not least, the other big game of Saturday night. Probably the best game by far, especially kind of towards the end. Oregon versus Penn State in Happy Valley is a whiteout game. Oregon comes in, they end up winning 30-24 in double overtime against the Nittany Lions. The Ducks do. And if I remember the stat correctly, James Franklin falls to 4-21 against, like, I don't want to say it's top 25 teams, but it's against, I think, top 10 teams, if I remember correctly. It's really bad how poorly he plays. Yeah. 4-21 versus top 10 teams. And again, this has been my biggest question for him for a long time, both on this show, on other shows that I've done with where we talk college football and whatnot, and other guys I've talked college football with, is he has not shown recently, within the last 5 years, that he can beat a top contending team that's a top 10 team and prove that Penn State is ready to take it to that next level. He just hasn't. Like, he has not gotten that quality win. And I know he beat Ohio State back in 2016, 2017, but that was when Saquon Barkley was the running back for Penn State. He was able to do it. All right, cool. How come you haven't been able to do that since? Because Penn State's had some talented teams. I mean, on paper, great guy. I mean, look at Abdul Carter. Look at Micah Parsons. You know, they've had great defensive guys on that side. Joey Porter Jr. What are you doing? You know, you look at Drew Aller. You know, now there's a lot of questions. Did he make the right move letting Bo Perbula leave to Mizzou and keeping Drew Aller? Because, and that's kind of the other question, is you look at Penn State. This is what I think is weird with Penn State too. And I know I'm going off on a little bit of a sidetrack, but just bear with me. The other thing I think is weird about Penn State is you look at all the other Power 4 teams that usually do pretty well and, you know, usually have quarterbacks that go pretty high in the draft, right? You know, Alabama's had several first-round quarterbacks. Most have been busts. Call it what it is. You know, Alabama's had a lot of good quarterbacks come in the NFL. Maybe haven't always succeeded, but they've had fairly good quarterbacks come in the NFL. They have at least had great collegiate careers. You know, LSU's, you know, produced some fairly decent quarterbacks into the NFL. Ohio State is probably one that, you know, everybody gives a ton of crap to. You know, they can win 10, 11, 12 games, win the Big Ten, go to the playoffs, whatever. Only a couple have won the national title, but they can still do it, though. And everybody gives them crap because once they go in the NFL, it doesn't correlate. You look at Penn State. Penn State almost always, here of recently, 9, 10, 11 wins. Not 12. They don't go undefeated because they almost always lose to Michigan. They almost always lose to Ohio State. And none of their quarterbacks, hardly any of their quarterbacks I've ever seen go in the first round. Like, at all. I can't even remember the last Penn State quarterback to go in the first round. Like I said, Saquon Barkley went pretty high. Micah Parsons, Abdul Carter. Never seen their quarterbacks go. Obviously, Trace McSorley was there. He didn't go until, I think, like the 5th or 6th round, maybe even later than that. There's another guy for them. I can't remember. He ended up getting drafted to the Jets. He didn't really do much of anything. Like these are guys that they have great careers at Penn State. They don't do anything with them. And I know to start the season, Drew Aller was favored to be, you know, one of the top 5 quarterbacks taken, if not, you know, to some people, the top quarterback taken. He hasn't looked that way, in all honesty. And if I'm an NFL GM and I'm looking at how you play against tough competition and you're not even keeping it close, being competitive, anything, I'm not going to do it. Now, that's not all on the quarterback. He's played fairly well in some of these games. I'm not taking you if you as the quarterback can't figure out how to get the win. Like, if your team can keep you close enough within 8, right? Within 8, because that means you just have to get a touchdown and a minimum 2-point conversion, right? You're the quarterback, lead them down there for a score. That's it. Lead them down there for a score. Now, if it's 8, you still got to do one more play. Now, if it's, you know, 7 to at least tie it, send it to overtime for the win, whatever, then you just got to hope the kicker makes it. That's all you got to do. If I'm an NFL GM, it leaves a lot to be desired. And again, it makes me question a lot about this Penn State team. The other thing that I saw a video on that makes me kind of chuckle, because again, I've talked about this on this show. I've talked about it on other shows. There's a point where Penn State fans were saying, fire Franklin, fire James Franklin. They want James Franklin fired. Here's my question to you. for any Penn States that are watching, I know MJ's watching. Hopefully, if she is, she'll chime in and let me know her thoughts on it. To Penn State, if you fire James Franklin, who are you going to get to replace him? Like, if you look at college football right now, they do kind of have the issue of not a whole lot of the great college quarterback coaches either are truly great and stay successful, or B, they stay. They go on somewhere else. You look at Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was kind of a part of that, of great college football coach, went to the NFL, didn't pan out, went back to college, now back to the NFL. Jim Harbaugh, you could kind of say, is like an outlier because, he was, he was obviously in college, went to the NFL, had some issues with the ownership of the San Francisco 49ers, went back to college for years, solid staples, solid, great college football coach, left and now back in the NFL. You at least have Ryan Day, who's still there. Nick Saban obviously retired. Brian Kelly's still there. I don't know if I'd necessarily call him great, though. I mean, he's good. He has like some of the most wins out of any of the coaches that are currently active, even Kirk Ferentz. Another good college football coach. It's a lot of questions, though, because, I mean, some of these guys just aren't getting the wins, and they're not getting the big wins either. Like Brian Kelly, he's been to, I think, one national title with Notre Dame. He's been with LSU 4 years now. They haven't gone to the playoffs. That's really annoying as an LSU fan. You haven't even made the playoffs. Like, if you make it and you get bounced, kind of like Notre Dame, you'd be frustrated, but at least you made it in. Like, at least, again, there's a shot, there's a chance. You're not even doing that. And Kirby Smart is obviously still there with Georgia. They had a little bit of run. So, I mean, there are good coaches, but a lot of the really good ones, they're already set where they're at. They're not moving anywhere. They're not going to leave. And if I'm Penn State, don't get me wrong, you want that guy to take you to the next level. You want that guy that is going to, truly elevate the program. But who is that guy? That's my question. Because honestly, right now, when I look at coordinators, when I look at even, NFL coaches, there's kind of some rumors. Maybe Mike McDaniel might want to leave Miami if he gets fired. Again, do you really think that's going to work? Do you think that's going to be the guy that can come in, save the program, save the school, and potentially get you a national title win? Don't get me wrong. He's made some prolific offenses with the Dolphins. I mean, he's done wonders with Tua, with Waddle, with Hill. He's done great. College is a little bit of a different animal, and he's going into cold weather. And it makes me wonder, even as a coach with, some of these teams. Like, obviously he's in Miami. You can always simulate cold weather. You can only do so much with cold weather, so much in Miami because it doesn't really get cold there. And he had come from San Francisco as a coordinator. So, I mean, as a coach, what are you doing to prepare your guys to deal with the cold? All honesty, if I'm Mike McDaniel, and let's say it's December, they're either potentially making a run for the playoffs or, the playoffs are going to start. It may not be the easiest and you may not want to do it. You might have to fly the team to somewhere up north to just practice. Call up Wisconsin after the college football season is over. Hey, can we utilize your stadium? Can we practice so that way guys can use the cold something? And believe me, if you can get used to Wisconsin, Minnesota cold in the Midwest, you can do a cold. You can do a cold anywhere. And that's just the reality situation. Unless they get home field advantage throughout, which obviously this year's probably a wash on that. I mean, you look at the division you're in. You're going to have to go to Buffalo and New York. It's cold. It snows. You're going to have to potentially go to Kansas City. It's really cold. It snows. It's windy. Like all of these teams, you're going to have to go north. There's very few dome teams that they have currently where you're not going to have to go up north to play them, and you're going to have to be prepared to coach. And for Mike McDaniel, if you go to Penn State potentially and do that, could you do it? Your track record doesn't tell me you can. So I'm just saying, Penn State, if it's me, appreciate Franklin while you have him. Appreciate what you've got. I do think he's still a solid coach. He's got obviously a great defensive coordinator. Again, offensive coordinator, a little bit of question. I don't even know who the offensive coordinator is, to be 1,000% honest with you. But with just the way that Penn State, the offense is a lot of questions to me as far as running the ball, throwing the ball, and whatnot. And again, just not being able to execute. Obviously, it starts with the head coach, but it leaves a lot to be desired with the offensive side of the ball too. And again, probably get a lot of hate comments from Penn State fans for this. Penn State fans for this. But again, to me, it's a lot of questions as to why they can't get it done, especially because of how highly touted Penn State always is, because how well they can recruit, how well they get players in. Penn State's almost always like top 10 ranked as far as being a great team. They just can't get it done. And again, even if you fire James Franklin, I don't know who you get to replace him legitimately. I don't know of any coach that is either in a spot where it's like, man, if we elevate him, he'll be great. You could maybe argue the head coach of USF, maybe. He's going to have a lot of other suitors that are going to be looking at him too to be head coach. Penn State could probably offer the money, but never know. I mean, Florida may or may not keep Billy Napier. Maybe he just wants to stay in Florida and he can get his guys transfer over. It's so much easier to recruit and stay down there than it is to try to recruit up and play in cold, snowy Pennsylvania nonetheless. But yeah, that's at least it for the college football part. We are going to take one quick break, and when we come back, we'll get more into the NFL side as far as all the craziness that happened even in the NFL this past weekend. So we will be right back.
Take a moment, take your time, let it set right. Let it drive right down in your conscious tide. Lean into the better times. 'Cause in a minute, in a moment, you'll notice a shining light, one that draws you in from deep inside. Reach out and connect tonight.
All right, welcome back in all to Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice. Big shout out to Die Tired for Why Won't You Wake Up, their music video and whatnot. Pretty good, honestly. I'd never heard that song or seen the video, so that's pretty solid in my opinion. Talked about college football in the first half of the video, all the crazy upsets that happened and whatnot. Kind of some of the reasons for it. NFL, just as crazy of upsets, just as crazy of scores and whatnot that happen. So we'll go through some of the games. I won't go through all of them. Some of the ones that are surprising. The Steelers' first NFL game in Dublin. Steelers get the win over the Vikings 24-21. Carson Wentz actually looks pretty solid for Minnesota. I mean, it's kind of hard to not to. I mean, Minnesota has a pretty decent offensive line. You've got Jordan Edison back. You've got Justin Jefferson. You have Aaron Jones. He's filling in, obviously, for an injured J.J. McCarthy. He's 30 of 46, 350 yards and 2 touchdowns Wentz was for Minnesota. I mean, that's pretty solid. I'll be honest, I don't know how long JJ McCarthy is out, but if I'm Minnesota, you got a guy that could potentially start, and who knows, maybe this is kind of another stepping stone, situation similar to like what Sam Darnold had for Carson Wentz. If he can do enough, maybe a team will take a shot as far as making him their franchise quarterback. You look at the Saints right now. Saints could really use a quarterback. The Browns could use a quarterback. All honesty, the Panthers, even though Bryce Young is there, could use a quarterback. And after that, that's pretty much about it. Maybe San Francisco is a backup, because then you could learn there too. Maybe, maybe you could even go to the Raiders if Pete Carroll doesn't want to necessarily deal with Geno Smith anymore. The Jets are potentially always an option. I don't know if the Dolphins will. They paid Tua quite a bit of money. Obviously, the Bengals, I mean, they love Joe Burrow. I love Joe Burrow. I don't think they're going to move on from him, but the Bengals also need a lot of help. But realistically, I mean, Carson Wentz could potentially get a career revival. I don't necessarily know where. It's not going to be a great team by no means. So if I was him, honestly, I might just stay in Minnesota. Ride out as maybe a career backup, or maybe even he takes the starting job. Who knows? But really surprised that I'm really surprised that Rodgers is doing as well with the Steelers as he has been. And I'm really surprised with the Steelers defense too. I think they lead the league in takeaways. I think them and the Vikings both do. But the Steelers defense has given up a lot. They're fairly good at getting sacks. They're fairly good at getting the quarterback. It is kind of surprising, though, how well Rodgers has played. And this is coming from a guy who, again, if anybody's ever watched the show, anybody's ever watched or knows me, I am not the biggest Rodgers supporter by no stretch of the imagination. I honestly expect him to be washed. I don't think that the Steelers season is totally done. I mean, they're 3-1 right now. So, I mean, the opportunity for them to do really well, it's still there. But how does this look, down the road? How does this look when and or if the Steelers start to struggle? When does that potential turmoil start? And I say that because, you look at what happened with how the Packers ended. Look at the last couple of years with the Jets. Now, albeit his first season, he got hurt with the Jets like 3 plays in. That's kind of a wash. But you look at last season, I mean, realistically, he's the reason why Robert Saleh got fired midseason, is because of Aaron Rodgers. Now, obviously, the Jets have their own issues. Their offensive line is still awful. Braylon Allen got hurt. So, I mean, one of their top running backs ended up getting hurt, unfortunately. But, I mean, there's still potential there. But the fact that Rodgers is able to make it work with the Steelers and Mike Tomlin, I'm not going to say it. Well, I am going to say it. It is kind of disappointing to see it, all honesty, because I did not want him to succeed. I just didn't. It's one of those. He's been good for so long. He's 18-22, 200 yards and a touchdown. 126 of those came from DK Metcalf. He's just like so cocky, and it's just so annoying. Because it's like, dude, you've been to one Super Bowl and you haven't even sniffed it since, and everybody's praising you as like the GOAT. You're this, you're that, and it's like, no, you haven't done much. Like, your playoff career is awful. Like, Joe Flacco has a better winning record than you, and Joe Flacco just got benched for Dylan Gabriel. A little bit of quote breaking news here on the show. Just less than an hour ago, the news broke that their Browns are going to start Dylan Gabriel and that Joe Flacco's on the bench. Now, I don't know what that means for Shador before anybody asks. I would assume he's probably still just the third string guy. I don't know if they're going to demote Joe all the way down to there yet. They'll probably keep him as the backup and just see what they have with Dylan. But who knows? Maybe they'll elevate Shador, give Shador a chance if Dylan doesn't do well. But the remaining schedule for the Steelers, though, I mean, it's winnable. They have to host the Browns. They go to Cincy, possible, probably both wins. They might end up 5-1 before they face the Packers, which would probably be a little bit of a tough game. Then they host the Colts, also potentially a tough game. Then they go to the Chargers. I think they'll probably lose that one. They host the Bengals. They host the Bengals this time. Probably win that one. They go to the Bears. They'll more likely win, unfortunately. Then they host the Bills. That's probably going to be a loss. They go to the Ravens. Now, the Ravens are 2 of their last 5 games. That'll be interesting to see because hopefully the Ravens defense has got it fixed and figured out by then, as well as hopefully the Ravens offense has got it figured out by then. But even then, the game is always hard to play for Pittsburgh. That rivalry between Baltimore and Pittsburgh is probably one of the best, I would say, more modern day rivalries that we have currently. And then they host the Dolphins. That'll be an easy win because it's December 15th. It's going to be cold in Pittsburgh. Then they go to the Lions. That's not going to be easy. They go to the Browns. Also probably not easy, especially then by that point, who knows what the Browns will be playing for, or if the Browns will want to try to play spoiler to maybe a potential playoff spot for the Steelers. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, I don't see Aaron taking to the playoffs. Even if they do, I see him getting bounced the first round just the same as they have all the times before. And I just don't see Aaron being able to lead that team. And it's going to be, again, it's going to sound really pessimistic. It's going to sound really mean. It's going to be kind of nice to have to see, Aaron finally come back down to earth again, that even though you went to another talented team, you couldn't get the job done. So again, I know it's pessimistic. I know it's mean. Some people probably hate me for it, but it is what it is. The Chargers and the Giants ended up actually being a better game than what people thought. The Giants ended up winning 21-18. Dart ends up actually winning in his debut for the Giants, which is awesome. Now, unfortunately, it does come with the effect of Malik Neighbors end up actually getting hurt his ACL. He's going to be out for the rest of the year, which sucks. So they do get a win. However, it comes at a costly price. Now, if anybody watched the show last week, I did have Yoel Hyman on, who he is a huge Giants fan. He's from New York originally. He's excited about Jackson Dart. I did ask him if they continue to lose, do you think the Giants potentially fire the GM and Brian Daboll both? If it was me, if I'm the owner of the Giants, I think Daboll's a great coach. One of the first years he's there, he gets, Daniel Jones, he makes him playoff caliber quarterback. They even win a playoff game. Obviously, the next year that completely falls apart and unravels, but he gets him a huge contract. He gets him to that point. I think he could do the same with Jackson Dart. And I think because of the offense that he's able to run, the potential style that Jackson Dart runs, Jackson Dart is a fairly big dude. He could have success with him similar to kind of the success that he had with Josh Allen when he was the offensive coordinator there for Buffalo. He could potentially make something happen there. Don't know how far they're going to be able to go, but he could make something happen. I wouldn't let the coach go. I'd let the GM go. GM can build great defenses on paper. Defense should be great. Hasn't been able to make it work though, because they don't have an offense. They haven't had an offense for years. So I don't necessarily think that's the coach's fault. I think that's more the GM. And if I'm the owner of the Giants, I'm firing the GM before I fire the head coach. Now, I'll give the head coach a new GM. I'll give him a year. If it was me, realistically, I'd try to give him 2 just to really try to rebuild something. And I would give the GM kind of a pass. Like, look, this isn't your guy. You get a couple year pass. If it doesn't work and we fire him, bring in somebody else. Then you kind of start over from scratch and start fresh again. But at least give him a chance to try to fix things, right? Like that's just me. Just give him a chance to try to fix things and make it right. But we'll see what happens as it goes on. But congrats to the Giants for being able to get their first win of the season. Speaking of the Giants, their old quarterback Daniel Jones gets his first loss to the Los Angeles Rams. This one was kind of surprising. I mean, Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua goes absolutely off. Puka Nacua, 13 receptions, 170 yards and a touchdown. Matt Stafford, almost 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, proving that he can still sling it. A little bit surprising. I'm not super surprised, though. I did kind of expect I kind of expected this to come out of the Colts because eventually they were going to have to lose. And I mean, this is a tough team. It was an away game. They ended up only losing by 7. Obviously, is a just really boneheaded interception to kind of end the game to even prevent them from being able to tie it. But I mean, this is one of those games that's not necessarily a bad one to lose. Like, you're going to have to lose games eventually. If it's me, I'd rather lose to a team that I know is good, that's going to be a quality playoff team, than I would losing to a really, really bad team and just not be a fan of it. But again, that's just kind of me personally, at least. Then we got the Ravens and the Chiefs. So this one was interesting because this is kind of Mahomes' like coming back game. He had 4 touchdown passes, just under 300 yards. Xavier Worthy came back. He had 83 yards. Chiefs offense looked tremendously different from what it did before. But that Ravens defense is a huge question mark, especially with all of the potential talent that this team had. That's what is probably the most surprising more than anything. Is this is a team that they had all these pretty good free agents that they signed. They signed Jair Alexander. They kept a lot of their core piece guys and whatnot. And they are absolutely struggling. They're giving up like 30 points a game, damn near. It's bad. And they got the news that Lamar Jackson does have a hamstring injury. He might be out a couple of games, potentially 2 to 3. So there is a chance for the Ravens to right the ship. But again, it does leave a lot of questions. One, you couldn't get it done against the Chiefs again. Lamar Jackson continues to struggle against Patrick Mahomes, which for a guy that has won MVP for the league, as phenomenal as Lamar Jackson is, as great as the regular season that he is, it's kind of surprising and it's kind of upsetting because it's like, man, you're supposed to be better than this. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, it leaves a lot to kind of be desired from him. So a little bit surprised that they ended up taking the L there. And then the final game that we'll kind of talk about, because Bengals and Broncos, the Bengals ownership needs to pay for an offensive line for Joe Burrow, because I mean the Bengals just do not look. I mean, 3 points. I think they only scored like 6 last week, maybe a little bit more than that against the Vikings, but it's kind of garbage time scores. That's bad. Like, that's really bad. And then of course Jets and the Dolphins, also a really bad game. I mean, Justin Fields kind of making a comeback. Him and that Garrett Wilson connection obviously is still there from their Ohio State days. But they fall 27-21 to the Finns, who also lost Tyreek Hill for the season due to not only just a really bad leg injury, but multiple tendon tears as well in his leg. So wishing Tyreek Hill the best. But the game that I think everybody was excited to see, but also extremely disappointed with, the Packers versus Cowboys, ending in a tie of 40-40. This game was honestly weird. And I say it because, as somebody who's a former Cowboys fan, again, for anybody that knows, when they lost to Jordan Love the first time in the playoffs, it was kind of Jordan's first year truly starting. Dallas was awesome. They were on like a 16-game win streak at home. Like, they were undefeated for like over a year at home. And then they just get destroyed in the playoffs by him. I stopped being a fan just immediately because of the glazing everybody gives Jordan Love, which is aggravating to no end. The Packers go up 13-0. It's like, man, they score a touchdown. I'm like, well, this is going to be the beginning of the end for Cowboys, and they're going to have a long, long night. Dallas gets the blocked extra point, returns it for 2. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, maybe that's the spark Dallas needs. And it was. They end up going in halftime up 16-13. They both score touchdowns in the third. The Packers end up scoring 17 points. Dallas scores 14. And then they both end up kicking just field goals back and forth in overtime to take it to 40 apiece. It's kind of weird because to me it shows that Green Bay is not the perennial Super Bowl favorite that everybody is kind of toting them out to be. I know a lot of people will probably still have them winning the Super Bowl, which is fine. That to each their own. I don't see them as that because, again, if history has taught me anything, and history has taught me anything about this Packers team as a whole, even when they had quote unquote better talent with them, they weren't able to get it done. I don't think Love is that guy. I think at the end of the game where he throws it with just a few seconds left, he didn't spike it. They didn't call timeout, nothing. He tries to throw it. And I've seen a few videos. People said, "Oh, the game clock operator could have put it to 0, and then Dallas would have won." Yeah, I mean, again, New York and them are going to have a lot to say about that too, as far as the replay goes. But there's a lot of questions on the very end of that, because that could have potentially ended as a disaster for Green Bay, because you're right there. Like, you are right there. That Dallas defense is getting chewed up left and right. You're, dinking and dunking on them. You're running the ball. You're doing everything you can against Dallas, and you're succeeding. You were 100% doing whatever you want to do to that Cowboys defense, and you almost blow the game. You almost blow the game. Like, that's it. If I'm a Packers fan, that's that's a little worrisome, because again, this is Jordan's Love, technically third year starting. I think it's his like 6th or 7th year in the league, but it's only his third year starting. It's like, that's a little worrisome. Like, you're supposed to be the guy. Like, you're taking the franchise on. Like, you're supposed to be running with the franchise. Now, obviously, there's experience. What do you like? Like, this is your third year starting, man. Like, what do you like? You've been in this situation. Like, you've done big things. Like, why are you struggling like this? And especially against a team where you've had a great game. You've had a big game all night. Like, what is happening? And on the other side of the ball, you had Micah Parsons pretty much shut down the entire game. He had 1 sack against Dak. For anybody who doesn't know, Dak tried to run it in. He got right back to the line of scrimmage, and then Micah, had landed on him from behind. So it technically went down as a sack, even though he didn't lose any yards. He didn't gain any yards. It was just at the line of scrimmage. They shut Micah down. And I will say, because I never really gave a reaction on it, for that trade between Dallas and Green Bay for Micah, for him and 2 first rounds, I think Dallas could have potentially gotten more had they done the trade earlier. But honestly, I don't think Dallas was the losers in this. I mean, I know people bring up Micah. Again, his presence is there. I'm not going to deny that. They went from like not being able to get any sacks currently to, they were like second or like first in pressures at least to start with when he was on the field, which is great. But again, there's a lot of questions there. Dallas was able to basically kind of neutralize him for the most part of the game. Of not, he was still there. They still had to be aware of him, but he wasn't going after Dak like, everybody thought he was going to. And that's kind of what he would do throughout the season. Like, he'd start off really hot, really big numbers. And then as the season wore on, his numbers went down. As playoffs came around, he kind of went non-existent. And I expect a lot of the same thing from Green Bay, to be honest with you. Even though he's there, it's a different defense, different scheme, different culture and whatnot, different mindset. It's kind of still the same old Micah, in all honesty. But I appreciate everybody tuning in, though. Hope everybody enjoyed. Please check me out on any and all social media, anywhere you get your podcasts inside the Hoosier Mind. Also, please check out any and all of the military broadcast radio shows and hosts. They're absolutely fantastic as far as life advice, music, anything and everything, other sports shows too. They're awesome. Absolutely love them. Hope everybody has a good week, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up